Oh, right. So this is a short, small love letter remembrance of the awesomeness of Representative Maxine Waters, Auntie Max. I want to say thank you again to Representative Waters for her long-term support of my grandparents' district in Inglewood, California, and just like how consistent her support of kids and parents has been in that area. And, when the pandemic first started, I went to work in February of 2020 trying to elicit support, trying to get things going. Because things weren't going and people cared about some sort of impeachment trial of something. And they're like, no, Faith, no, we can't talk about this. But, I saw Maxine Waters. She was like, boom, I'm on this. Like, she was making sure that things were happening. She was pushing LAUSD. She was pushing housing. It's one of these things where people on the internet will often have opinions about people who I've known in real life to be the most amazing, just utterly awesome humans. And I would agree that the press does not depict them as they are, right? And so I kind of was going to say, this is my experience at least, and it might be different for other people, but, I'm a person who identifies as a Christian, as a conservative, and I would never vote against Maxine Waters. Because I truly believe in her history of service and her legacy of service. And there are people I know who have said, oh, okay, there's we can come after these black leftists, black liberals, and they've come after us, but I would definitely encourage you to pick someone else. Because as you will find out through investigations, she really has consistently been there. And there were times that we didn't always agree. And when I first had started knowing Rep Waters, I was about 8 years old, about 7, 8 years old, and my grandmother had noticed my interest in politics, particularly around the '88 election. I had become purely, obsessed with what's happening, what's going on, who's telling the truth, what the media knows, what it doesn't know, how can we trust the media, how can we trust anybody. I was like a bit of an 8-year-old conspiracy theorist, probably, it sounded like, but, especially with just how much I knew at that time from reading books and going and literally at that time there was no internet at the same level, so I was mostly reading information on microfiche in libraries and just spending time as a very small kid learning information as much as I could, which I definitely understand, had its own bias, right? It was presented in this way, but I was always thinking of it as you're wrong. So we had another bias that I was looking at, was trying to figure out where the right is, and so my grandmother had said, our congressperson, she works in Congress. I was like, I know what Congress is, you could go, we can intern, you can do some work in her office, get some work experience, and start really understanding what this world is about if you really want to be part of it in the future. And so I started going to her office and stuffing envelopes, and that was pretty much what I did, like real basic stuff that's like for little kids, nothing hard at all, just really easy to sit there and also just be present and listen and hear stuff and keep my mouth shut. It was like hard for me, obviously. Um, but I also had the luxury and the great privilege of being able to spend time with it was so interesting to be like, oh, I represent Maxine Waters because I'm always like Maxine, but it's like Auntie Maxine to me, in the sense that she's somebody who I grew up speaking with as a young person, and getting a chance to, when she used to visit the area that she used to exercise in, my grandmother would also often meet her, and they were kind of exercise buddies for several years. So I was able to kind of go on those walks and try to exercise a bunch, which is leading up to the whole working with the Duchess of York, because there's a lot of exercise there too. So the Duchess is very like, let's have a walk after lunch, So it really was something lovely to experience as a young person, being in nurturing environments with women who want to see every single person that they engage with be a force for good, So Rep Waters and I, initially, there was when I started to kind of come out to her and say, hey, I'm going to be trying to work in LGBT work, or I want to be in this kind of queer space. It was a bit of a startling thing for her, as far as that's not what I thought for you. And, just how can you really do that? There's not a lot of black LGBT people. And I really didn't understand that from the capacity. So I am really thankful for that kind of heads up, because I'm like a little podunk, like country mouse is like a big mouse to me. Coming from where I came from in San Luis Obispo, where, we went and got the food out of the dirt in our backyard, and I brought it in the house to make it to eat. So, like, I grew up milking cows and stuff, and being part of a earthly world that is not so sophisticated, basically. Like, what is this? What's going on? And I thought people who were Democrats and progressives would like everybody. Like, what do you mean they don't like gays? What? Or that, black folks who are about equality, that they also would be about LGBT people. But when you look at it, there had been a lot of dissonance and difference and a lot of exclusion. And so that's really what I started experiencing as soon as I got to UCLA in college in '98, was this kind of like immediate, like, the Black Student Union does not want a black LGBT group as part of their group, but you can be with the gays, and we definitely will come to our parties. And they definitely did. But they came through, and people also came through them. It was a thing. But when it comes down to it, it was very on the down low all the time. You had to be black, and I was really committed to making a world that wasn't so binary in that way. That you could be somebody who does politics and who gets in the room for all those communities at the same time. So I did ask Representative Waters at one time, when I just happened to run into her on a plane on the way to DC, and we were both going to potentially similar White House events dealing with black community, and I was just like, hey, it's me, and it's nice to see you, and I really appreciate what you've done. And she was looking at me like, are you, I'm like, no, I really appreciate, like, really, like, I was trying to give her, like, no, you was right. Like, but, it was hard. It was a hard lesson at the time, but, at the same time, I understand it, and I don't, I always want people to kind of understand that, like, it's not binary. Like, you can't be like, oh, you're black and you're this, or you're gay, or this. It's not. No, it's about how people treat you. And when July 21st, 2014 came around, and President Obama had invited me to stand on stage with him in the White House, I was completely alone. Right? There was not a single family member that I could have invited to that event without worrying about a homophobia kind of incident, because my family is just not really supportive of LGBT things, and very outspoken and like protesting and like, here's my sign kind of, or very homophobic with their language, and just be like, oh, that person's a slur, no big deal. It's just like how it is, and with where I come from, and so I've never mixed those worlds together. For the most part, I've tried to keep them pretty separate and limit their interaction, because I worry about harming other people, harming myself, and so knowing I was going to stand on stage alone, other people had their family members there, other people like that, was kind of difficult. But Representative Maxine Waters was there. She came right up to me and was like, I'm so proud of you. I'm going to sit in the front row, and I'm your family for this one. I'm going to take pictures and send them to your grandma, and she's going to be so proud of you. And it was really great, because my grandma was at that point too old, it was difficult for her to travel. It would have been really, really tough for her to make it. And I really appreciated the fact that I had somebody like that in my past, in my history, there's somebody who, when in the same room, will come to the front for me, right? So I definitely encourage you to look for those people, and I, tell people if you're able to find the good in politics, it might exist on all very good people on all sides, it looks like. Just might.